So in the battle of the beautifuls between the two ladybird male romantic leads, you're going beautiful boy.
Yep, I'm going Chalamet.
I'm getting the battle of the boys. I'm going boy erased. Just by a hair. Just by a hair. Yeah. I don't know.
You're a revelation. Won't you liberate me now from a holy bow?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is review number 527 with a review of Boy Erased. I'm Christopher Schnese.
I'm Stephen Miller, and I am using the sin of podcasting to try to fill a God-shaped void in my life.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week on the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest film releases coming to a theater near you. This week, we are talking about the film Boy Erased. It is maybe or maybe not still in limited release, but you should be able to see it soon if you can't already catch it now. But yeah, so as we stated in the last episode that you may have heard, we are recording a big batch of episodes that are going to be kind of run out over the next couple weeks. Yeah. This week, next 2 weeks, something. We're going to be doing a lot of traveling, so the schedule will get pretty crazy, but we're going to do our best to bring you as many episodes as we can to not let you guys hanging around as we approach the big, crazy end-of-year schedule that will be coming in the next few months.
I feel like this year is going to be even worse than most in that regard. I feel like so many things are just now coming out or will come out in the next month. I have no idea how to catch them. And, like, Netflix is upping its game. Like, other people are also putting out movies, so it's just getting more and more difficult.
It will be rough, and with all the traveling we're doing, it'll be rougher than usual, but we're committed to trying to bring you something.
Yep.
And then at the end of everything, we're going to bring you a big end-of-year recap episode, which, I mean, it'll be crazy. I think this will be the first year. Yeah, this is the first year that we've been to a film festival or a couple film festivals during the time that it was running. Our top 10 lists are going to be crazy.
We haven't even figured out the parameters yet. Like, if we're going to need it to officially have come out for us to include it, or if we're just going to include film festival releases too.
Yeah, because there are definitely things that I think we were both huge fans of that are not even existing yet in this year. I don't even know if they're scheduled to come out, but
they might never come out, so might as well talk about them.
But yeah, we are here to talk about Boy Erased. I think this will maybe be a more serious and less fun and exciting episode than the Overlord episode, which is already in your feed somewhere. But
don't let my intro fool you.
But yeah, this is a serious film. We're probably going to do some relating of it to films that we did see at the festival that we kind of just offhandedly mentioned a few moments ago. But yeah, so we're going to get started. We're going to take a listen to the trailer for Boy Erased, and then we're going to come back and give you a review.
Jared, I want you to do well. I want you to have a great life. I love you, but we cannot see a way that you can live under this roof if you're going to fundamentally go against the grain of our beliefs. Jared, tell me the truth, that's all.
I think about men. I don't know why. And I'm so sorry.
Your parents signed you up for a program to fix you, but Jared, you are a perfectly normal, very healthy teenage boy.
They're gonna do things for you.
You're a revelation.
You want to say your goodbyes?
Welcome to the Refuge Program.
You cannot be born a homosexual. This is a lie. It's a choice.
Go. Fake it till you make it. Become the man you are not. Save yourself.
Jared, God will not love you the way that you are.
Is this what you want? Who's gonna strike this demon down? Hit it!
It's a rocky.
I'm having a tough time.
I'm gonna give you some advice. Tell them whatever they want to hear. Play the part, unless you really think you can change, or even want to.
What you're going through right now is just a moment.
A moment. Yeah, a moment.
I love God, and I love my son. For your father, it's a little more complicated.
We are not finished. I am, because you won't listen.
Your father is sitting here. Tell him how you hate him.
I'm not gonna pretend I hate my father. I don't hate my father.
Then where is all this anger coming?
Because you're making me angry.
Open the sometimes you gotta hurt a child in order to help them, but a mother knows when something isn't right.
I don't want to pretend anymore.
I've had to ask myself and God if I'm ready to lose you.
You're a revelation. Won't you liberate me now?
All right, so that was the trailer for Boy Erased. It's about a young man who is sort of dealing with these feelings that he has inside of himself and kind of questioning who he is. And due to some events that happen, he is sort of outed in a way to his parents, one of which is a pastor at a church, and they send him to conversion therapy or school or camp or whatever you want to call it. And this is kind of the story of his time there and how that shaped who he is. Stephen Miller, what did you think of Boy Erased?
I thought this was a pretty beautiful movie, actually. It very much exceeded my expectations. So when the trailer first started playing, there were a few key takeaways I had. One, I've already seen this movie this year. It was called The Miseducation of Cameron Post. 2, I'm excited for Fat Russell Crowe. And 3, this just feels like it's trying to make me feel really sympathetic for like a character that, at least from the trailer, I thought, okay, this is just going to be another gay coming of age story that's going to be like, woe is the poor white kid who had to learn who he is, you know? And it's not that those stories aren't important, you know, like we liked Love, Simon. You liked Alex Strangelove more than I did. Like, we obviously have a soft spot for these kind of narratives, but it just kind of felt like this is playing up the melodrama in a way that, like, of the other melodramatic movies, I just didn't think it was going to earn it necessarily. And I have to say, like, watching this movie, it was so much more personal than I expected. There's a contradictory thing that I feel, because with Miseducation of Cameron Post, we both criticized it as it seems like it doesn't get religion right, and it isn't even clear that it gets conversion camps right. Like, it had these things that just felt weird or, like, didn't feel accurate just to our... You know, neither of us have had direct experience with conversion camps or anything like that. Like, among other things, I think they have mostly ceased to exist by the time we came around. So, like, we have no one we know has had a direct experience with a conversion camp, but we do have plenty of experience with, like, religion and with religious people and with, like, intolerance towards LGBTQ people and all of this. Like, it was something that at least I definitely grew up with and believing for a good extent. And somehow this movie is both more wildly dramatic, more heightened in its depiction of religion and in the wrongs of these camps, and it felt more authentic at the same time. I don't know how to explain that. Like, I had forgotten while watching it that it was based on a true story, so this was genuinely just like how the movie felt to me when I was watching it. I feel like Joel Edgerton, his character as the leader of this group, was, like, very heightened, had a lot of flaws, and I 1,000% believe that person exists. Like, I believe that guy is out there. I believe he thinks somehow that he's doing the right thing. I think he's surrounded himself with people that have other motives, but he's still blinded himself to, like, the need to masculinize these kids, you know, the need to get them straight. I believe Lucas Hedges' character, he's going through a moral dilemma, which is also, like Cameron Post, not, like, as heightened an internal struggle as I would have maybe, quote, wanted if I were just picking this narrative from scratch. You know, it kind of feels like he's someone who, he knows what is true about himself and he fights it a bit, and he gets to a point not too late in the movie where he's not fighting anymore. But again, it just felt so true. Like, it just felt accurate to me, and I think it wasn't using anything cheaply in my mind. I thought it was telling this story with grace, and it was moving in a kind of ex-church kid way. Like, the music to me felt like worship music that I listened to when I was a kid. Like, it really brought me into that feeling of, like, I am 18 or 19 and, like, I am feeling all these things so strongly for the first time, you know? And yeah, I just think it's really well done. Russell Crowe doesn't get a whole lot to do, but the scenes where he shines, like, they got me real good. I do think the Nicole Kidman character, if there's one person who felt unrealistically good, it was her in this movie. She kind of gets a few like big applause moments that felt like the movie didn't really need them. That's kind of like a true story bleeding in the other direction, where it's like honoring people a little bit more directly than maybe it needed to. But
I mean, I would kind of push back on that a little bit, just because I think that in the dynamic of this period of time and those archetypes of characters of people who, like, when you are married to a pastor at a church, they inherently have an authority if you believe in what they are the pastor of,
right?
That you kind of don't really have a say. I mean, you're sort of unfortunately you're kind of just literally under their wing and under their rule all the time, and you don't really have a way to question and stand up for yourself because they have the moral high ground literally in your view. And I think that because the journey she goes on causes her to feel like she needs to make moves for her son, that I think that the things she's saying may sound like the film trying to give you that applause moments, but they are huge moves for that character within universe, so to speak.
True.
And I think that, like, the type of movie that we're watching makes that feel overly sentimental, but it's still a huge moment for those characters, and it means immense things to the kid, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that same moment in any other film would feel earned and that strong. It's just because we're in this type of film and it's Nicole Kidman,
right,
that you question the validity of that choice, right?
Sure, it's true. And again, I don't even really question the honesty of it. It's just that beat does come across as a little sentimental. And maybe that's, again, just the story that it's telling. So it isn't even really a critique. It's just that was one of the few moments where I was brought out of the movie a little bit. And I felt like, okay, this... Especially because we're in San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
Like, so even more so than most metropolitan areas, like the applause moment there is quite big. Like the crowd definitely hooted and cheered and got very excited about it. And just in general, when a movie has that, when it like pushes the message so directly, that I just always recoil like just a little bit from that. But like, I don't know, even still, like, this is a very theme-heavy movie. It's a very message-heavy movie. You know where it stands from the beginning. There's no questioning who is right and who is wrong, nor should there be. But I just think it plays with the family dynamics in a way that makes it way more real. Like, I can imagine the struggle of the pastor dad and how this kid wants to meet his father's expectations, and he doesn't even know who he is. He doesn't know where he fits in this world. There's a great scene in this movie where he meets another kid, probably like a little older college student. I couldn't really figure out the timeline, named Xavier, and they kind of talk about God and life in the way that
I really hate that his name was Xavier. I feel like he's supposed to be like the
savior character.
Yeah, the savior character, and it just that kind of took me out a little bit. I was like, come on, this sounds like a naming in like a more cheeky movie, right?
Yeah. True. But anyway, they just have this conversation about like religion and the world and where they fit in it. That is like exactly the sort of thing that when you're 18 in a way for the first time, like you're going to have a drink and have this conversation. It's going to be the most meaningful thing in the world. And like maybe with 10, 15 years removed, like it's a little cheesy, but in that moment, that was everything, right? That was you opening up for the first time. And I think in the context of like a coming of age or coming of adulthood film, I think this just lands all of those emotions really well, and everything from the soundtrack to the drama of the film to the very, very clear message of the movie. I just thought it all worked well. It was a movie that I was glad that I watched, and I feel like it does its message proud. It definitely does what it set out to do.
Yeah. I have sort of mixed feelings about this film. I agree with mostly everything you said. What I love about this film, especially when you compare it to something like The Miseducation of Cameron Post, when complaining about The Miseducation of Cameron Post, one of the things I really disliked is there was never a moment in that film at all where Chloe Grace Moretz, right,
was miseducated.
She's never miseducated. She's not confused about like why she's there. She's like, oh, I'm here because my parents sent me. She never once is really participating. She's just sort of showing up and being like, this place is weird, right? Like, there's never a sense of dread within her as to who she is. And her biggest confusing moment involves a character who is not her, right? And I think that in that film, it just got so much wrong. And what I love about this film is this is a boy who he wants the conversion therapy to work. Like, he already feels conflicted himself, and he's sad about the way he feels. And it's a struggle for him, not because his family sent him there, but because he thinks they were well-intentioned, and he doesn't know how to counter that himself. And it's a story about him slowly coming to realize that there is nothing wrong with him and that he doesn't need to be there. And yes, these people are crazy. Like, in Cameron Post, she arrives and goes, this place is fucking weird. And then all the other characters are like, yeah, this place is fucking weird, right? And it's just a story of these people at some camp with a fucking weird counselor who...
Yeah, like, and with him, like, he knows they're a little bit dumb and hokey, but when you grow up like a church kid, there's lots of hokey things that you still are like, this is still genuinely good. And like, yeah, they made typos and the pastor's a little bit of a goofball, but like, the message is still right. And so he kind of has that from the beginning where he's like, I feel like this is cheesy, but I'm going to try it. And then watching cheesy, but I'm going to try it morph into, oh, this is evil. Like, that's the arc, rather than like, this is dumb and it's always just dumb and that's where we're going to leave it.
Yeah, and it's not, I need to get out of here, let me hop in the back of a truck. This is like, this is a problem and I need to get away from here and also carry this book with me so other people can see how fucking crazy this place is, right? And it's like, the reason why this story has the authenticity that it does is because in the real life, he did take this manual from the school and shared that manual with people and showed how really fucking crazy these places are and how scary they are and what those people are trying to do. And I think all of that is really, really powerful. I was really drawn into this film. I was completely sucked in. I was there for the whole journey of the character. I wanted him to say the things that he couldn't say in some moments, to challenge the people that he was interacting with. And I think really I was ripped out of this film when it makes the jump forward in time to modern day where he's writing the story that we're watching, essentially. And I think that there was a disconnect for me of where he, like, yes, when he first is admitted to the camp, they rip pages out of his journal so we know he's a writer. But like, jumping forward to the future where he's writing like a New York Times piece or whatever is going on, like, I didn't get that his experience for 12 days in this place equaled the op-ed that he was writing. Like, I obviously in real life there was something that was written, but I feel like there's a disconnect between the journey he personally is going on and the telling of the world that journey. And I there are logical steps that can be made in between when he got away and when he wrote the thing. But I feel like I have this book, I need to do research, and now I need to tell the world. Right. It was less about, this is what I experienced and this is what people are experiencing. And the film makes it feel like this is what I did to get out of here. And that's not the story that was told. It was like, these places are fucking evil and we need to stop them. And the film doesn't do a good job of making that connection. It just goes, and then he wrote a thing, look where we are. And I kind of, that sort of upset me in a way, just because I was just ripped out of the journey and then transported to a place that I didn't feel was earned logically with the narrative that I watched. I also have some questions, and I'm trying to like figure out how to phrase this correctly. But like, the father is clearly ignorant, and he, in
a very believable sort of ignorance, he's especially for like an Arkansas Baptist pastor.
Yeah. But so I'm trying to build up my point here so that I can try to say everything so that people would get what I'm saying and not what the words I'm going to say. But the father doesn't understand homosexuality and believes that there is no such thing as homosexuality. There is just sinful actions that you take. The son has not taken sinful actions. Right. It is purely him feeling that he thinks about men.
His same-sex attraction.
Yeah, it's same-sex attraction. The thing his father is worried about is acting on those things. He has not acted on anything. He has a clear and obvious reason to not have to go to this place, because the thing that the father is sending him there is for something he interprets as just being actions, which the son has not actually participated in. There is something that brings up the fact that he has these thoughts, and the father interprets a lot from that and makes decisions based on that. Mm-hmm. And there are plenty of opportunities for the character to just say, like, I'm just attracted to men. I used to date a girl. You knew her. You invited her to the house last week. Like, mm-hmm. It's not like the father, like in Cameron Post, the parents walk in on her with another girl. This isn't I know you are doing things and thus I will send you here. It is simply this other thing. Somebody told me that you are gay, so I'm sending you here. And it feels weird that, like, there's one scene where they start to have this conversation where he's reading from a thing of the things that he feels guilty about, and nobody believes that that's all he feels guilty about. But it's like, why is this the first time you're having that conversation? Like, because for him, that is huge. Mm-hmm. He feels guilty about nothing, right. Absolutely nothing. But he was taught that those feelings are wrong. And even though they're only feelings, he's struggling with that as a person. Mm-hmm. And everyone else is treating him like the only problem is your actions. And he has taken zero actions. Mm-hmm. And I thought that it was just weird that nobody talked about this. And he never tried to defend himself in a way. And the film doesn't deal with the fact that, like, the people who are against him don't even think that he is anything. The whole point of conversion therapy is that if you don't do anything that they consider like a homosexual action, then you're not a homosexual. Right?
I don't know about that. Like, I don't know that the film does a good job of communicating it, but they definitely consider, quote, SSAs to be sinful behavior. Like, it's one of the things in their family tree alongside, like, pornography and gambling and prison and all the other things that can be, quote, wrong with a person.
But I think
I think people do go to conversion therapy in this film and otherwise to change that, quote, sinful attraction in their head, right? To get at the root of it and make it go away. It becomes a kind of like electroshock therapy for the brain of, like, I'm going to try to take away the sinful thing that is a sinful thought that I have.
But I would argue that is them treating the symptom. Like, it's like when they're teaching you not to stand in an effeminate way in that school. It's not that standing effeminately makes you gay. It's that they're worried that you will.
I think they call it fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah.
That's their method. Act, dress for the sexuality you want, not the sexuality you have, right?
yeah. But that's my point. Then is that, like, all they're trying to do is eliminate all the things that add up to what they think you will do with your actions. And it's not that they're thinking that those things make you one way. It's that those things limit your ability to maintain your masculinity in a way. Like, there was a disconnect between, because their whole argument is that it's not who you are, it's what you're choosing to do. And if you don't do anything, then by their own definition, you have passed their test, right?
like I just don't. So I think there's two different groups in this movie. There are the Russell Crowe and the pastors. There's their group who have a kind of prayer circle and bring him into this camp. Their beliefs almost definitely are that same-sex attraction is also a, quote, sin, because they are praying over him. They're talking about the feelings that he has, and he asks, do you want to change? He gives him an ultimatum. And that ultimatum is not about an action that he will or will not take in the future. It's, you currently have this, quote, sin. Do you want to change? So I think that's how, like, his dad sees this. His dad also doesn't believe him about this past event that maybe we should do, like, we shouldn't do a spoiler for it. That event is, like, a very kind of jarring, surprising moment in the film, and I think it plays it the way it would have happened. So again, I'm not criticizing it, but that was a moment that, like, really pushed me into the, like, oh, this is a different movie than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Camp. But anyway, the father definitely misinterprets that and probably believes there are lies around it. But I still think he sends him to the camp to change his, quote, sinful attraction, which is not the universal way that fundamentalist Christians see this. Like, by the time I was going to church, at least, the line was, like, people might have those attractions and they are just going to stay, stay single forever, right? And that is their cross to bear, and that is the end of it. But that is definitely not like universal among churches. Like some of them, probably these Southern people would say it's the devil in you, kid. You know, it's like the sinful nature.
Yeah.
The place that he sends him to, I think as a baseline, they believe those attractions are wrong, but the kooky methods they have created require them heightening everything. It has to be, oh, you hate your father and you want to do this and you're so wicked and you're so evil. And they're kind of like hammering the total depravity side into you that like by the time he is giving his confession, and his confession is like, this is the only wrong thing I've done and I like feel guilty about it. Joel Edgerton has this kind of screaming match because his thought is like, that can't be all it is. It's a sin. It must have destroyed you. It must have made you do all these other things too. And I think that says more about like his fucked up methodology and his belief about how the world works than it is with like their definition of sin or not sin, or homosexual and not homosexual. So to me, that all made sense, and maybe it's just because I've met people who had those definitions. So like, I kind of perceived those through whatever the characters were saying.
It made sense, but that conversation is what topples the whole system, right? So I feel like because that conversation was always there, all you had to do was speak your mind, kid. Then like it just felt like it felt like the context of way this story was written to be told felt like the character himself was withholding information because he thought everybody else had the right idea. And it wasn't until he finally got in a situation where he's like, I've been beating myself up over nothing. Like, you're telling me that this doesn't count. And something about that construct kind of bugged me in a way. And it didn't lessen the experience of the movie as a whole. It just kind of took me out for a second. I was like, well, like, yeah, just like, I get that it's hard, but according to their own definition, you passed.
Yeah, I guess that just isn't how I read those conversations. I do see that as Lucas Hedges' character is kind of awakening. He's learning to push back. I don't feel like that is a moment when he decides there is nothing wrong about who I am. I think maybe characters have conversations like that, and I just kind of brush them aside as like movie moments. I feel like that character after 12 days still doesn't know. He has a lot of fucking baggage to work through still before he is comfortable in his own skin. And what that conversation is basically, I don't have the answers, but you sure as hell don't have the answers. Get me out of here. You know, and I kind of feel like that is what that outburst is your methods are wrong and your grand theories are ridiculous and you are heightening everything to justify beating the crap out of people and doing these terrible things. And I'm going to yell at that, you know?
So he hasn't cured himself of his worries, but he definitely knows he needs to
he knows he needs to leave. And I think that lingering of I need to get out of there has been there for a long time, and it's because he's a smart kid, you know? Like he's like the son of a pastor. He's heard all these verses before. Like he knows how this works for the most part. And like nothing that people do in the camp has the ring of like these guys know what they're talking about. Yeah. So I think it's an interesting journey. It's probably one that I like project a lot into, but it definitely feels like a journey of someone. It is, of course, primarily about, sexuality and coming to terms with your sexuality and breaking free from people that would tell you have to change because you don't. But I also think it works just as an idea of like that moment when people are starting to like come of age and grapple with like the things they've learned and the course that they thought their life was going to be. What do you do when that all comes crumbling down, right? Like, how do you carve a new path when you have no idea what to do and all you have is this like instinct that what you're being told isn't fully correct? So I think I think it definitely works on multiple levels. I do think, though, that it does an interesting thing in its treatment of religion because, like, maybe not the Joel Edgerton character. I'll say every character, including the Joel Edgerton character, mostly has a quote redemption. Joel Edgerton's is an epilogue textual one of like, it's not a redemption. That's why I'm putting in quotes.
I don't think it's redemption.
It's not a redemption, but it is saying like, hey, like this guy worked through a lot of random shit as well. Like it isn't redeeming him. Humanizing is the word I want to say. They have a humanizing arc. I think like the relationship between the character and his dad, Russell Crowe, is a really interesting one, because from Russell Crowe's perspective as this like, you know, stubborn, strong Baptist man, he's a car dealership owner, and he's like a pastor of a church, and he's preaching. And
we know that car dealership owners can have some big influence on a person's life, as we'll discuss in a future film.
This is true. Yeah, so well played. So he basically is grappling with this problem of like, I believe what I believe. I've been preaching it forever. My view of the world is like completely inflexible, and I don't want to hate my son. And I think like this movie does a really interesting way. If it doesn't paint him in a good light, like that stubbornness is not good, and the degree to which he's willing to like sacrifice his son to that is bad. But it's very human, and I feel like the movie is kind of a loving portrait of a father and son who eventually reconcile. I don't know the degree to which they do. Just the way the credit scene at least goes, it hints that like reconciliation did eventually happen with his family, and maybe that's like a tepid one where they don't agree on anything still, and they've just like learned how to love each other anyway.
Yeah.
But I just think that whole arc, again, because it's coming from a true story, it just has that ring of truth that like I feel like a fiction wouldn't get that right. In the fiction, everyone would be either Nicole Kidman or Joel Edgerton. Either they're going to be like, I accept you, a mother always knows, or they're going to be like, you know, rabble, rabble, rabble. I'm like, I know what I believe.
Stealing hamburgers?
Yeah. The Spirit of Christ compels you, you know, like those extremes. And I think that middle ground of like the way most people feel with like, if their parents are Trump supporters, if their parents are all sorts of things where it's like, I don't agree with you and I don't like what you think, but I want to love you anyway, you know? And yeah. I think this movie is like a lot about that middle ground, and I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that stuff was handled pretty well. So the one sin that this film commits, the most egregious sin, is this perfect moment that is wasted in the film, which made me so sad that they didn't go for it. And so we've talked a little bit about like this, the conversion camp is like doing this thing where they're teaching you how to stand in a more masculine way, right? The thing is, you have to stand in Superman pose. You can't stand with like your hands, your fingers have to be in front of your hips, not behind your hips in this effeminate way. And there's this moment as things are kind of coming to a head where they have there's this fight between this butting of heads, I should say, not a fight, between Joel Edgerton and Lucas Hedges. And as Lucas Hedges is storming off after they've had this confrontation where he said all the big things to him, Joel Edgerton is kind of at his wit's end. And like as he's like holding his head, he sits and sets his hands on his hip with both of his fingers behind his hips. And I thought for sure Lucas Hedges was going to be like, oh, put your hands like this. It's more masculine. And he doesn't fucking say the line. And it's like, you've just owned this guy.
Do you think that scene was still intentional, though? Do you think it was meant for you to get that little, like, gratification?
Maybe it's there to subliminally suggest things. But I mean, like,
it's way more subliminal than Gallagher's mustache.
I mean, they have pretty similar mustaches.
That's true.
But anyways. But I just mean it was this perfect moment where you already have the moral high ground. You can now shove it in somebody's face, right? And it made me so sad that he did. Like as soon as that scene happens, I'm like, the hands, say the hands, and he just didn't do it. And I was like, this movie, she's so close to nailing it. It would have been so impactful in that moment too.
I do want to say, so this is the second Joel Edgerton movie that I've seen, to my understanding. Maybe I've seen another that was just on the fly, directed by him. But between this and The Gift, I think like he is definitely a very strong actor turned director. Like he's definitely favoring actors still, which is kind of common for people who do this. We'll probably talk about that again in a future movie. But like I think this feels like a very well-crafted movie. I think it flows very nicely. It has good moments where it kind of lets you sink in the ambience and just like enjoy the soundtrack. Yonzi and Troye Sivan, who is like singing the soundtrack, who's also the blonde character in the conversion camp. It has like a good balance of mood moments and moments that are just meant to like progress the story and give a window into characters. And like you nitpick the epilogue, and I kind of agree. Like that leap is a little too tidy. It doesn't show you quite enough, but I think it is so worth it just for the family dynamic it pulls you back into immediately. Yeah. I think those scenes are just wonderfully done. And I really like the pacing of this movie. I think it is interesting that I kind of criticized Beautiful Boy for jumping back and forth in time in ways that made me not always know where I was or like why it was doing it in that order. I have no idea why this is different for me, but this also jumps in time, and I felt totally happy with the fact that it was doing it. Maybe it's just because it was a more like one character taking stock of his own life, and I can follow that emotional journey easier than I can follow like a father jumping back in time. I have no answer, but for some reason it worked really well on me this time, and I'm going to give Joel Edgerton props for that.
Sounds good. Well, speaking of giving him props, how about we get to verdicts for this film?
Sure.
All right, Stephen Miller, if you're going to give this a must-see, recommend with a caveat, wait for rental, pass with a caveat, or a must-avoid, what would you give it?
I've been teetering between recommend and must-see. I'm going to say must-see. I've been too positive on the movie in this review to not do that. I don't think this stands among like the best films I've seen this year. It is definitely very, very message-heavy, like other movies we're going to talk about tonight. But I think that message is a very personal one. It's a personal one crafted by someone who has lived in this world, who is trying to be an advocate for something. And I think as an act of advocacy, this movie just does a really good job, and it still ties in the personal dynamic in a way that isn't vilifying people. It isn't caricaturizing them. I think it gets the religion right. I think it gets self-questioning right. And it does a lot of things right without ever being like a PSA, even though it is very direct in its themes and its allegiances. So worth checking out, definitely. Beautiful movie, even if it isn't like the most subtle of the year.
Yeah. I'm going to give it a recommend with a caveat. I think this film is on the whole like mostly incredibly great. I think there's just some things that make it a complicated review for me in just following its narrative threads and kind of how it chooses to like quantify this few-day experience as being something that is a journey larger than just this journey that he went on. And like that, I struggle with kind of what it's doing with that narratively. But I think that the moments of him there and how he interacts with his family and how he views his own experiences is all terrific. And I would almost give it a must-see, but it's just like there are some things that just kind of brought me back from it in a way that I didn't have with Beautiful Boy, even though they're completely different subject matters. That film was just like pulled me in amazingly, and then this film was like so much of it I was in, and then I would just dip out for a second and be like, wait, where am I? Oh yeah, okay, cool. Well, let me dive back in for a second. And I think that it could have been up there, and it just little things pulled it out for me.
So in the battle of the beautifuls between the two Ladybird male romantic leads, you're going Beautiful Boy.
Yep, I'm going Chalamet.
I'm getting the battle of the boys. I'm going Boy Erased. Just by a hair. Just by a hair. Yeah. I don't know. Beautiful Boy is doing a more complicated, difficult thing. It's not really fair for me to pit them against each other.
Yeah. But I mean, it's Beautiful Boy is doing that complicated thing for two separate characters, and this film is only doing it for the one character.
Right.
And it's like if Beautiful Boy was just Timothée Chalamet's experience and none of the father's experience, I would probably feel exactly the same about it. But it sort of doubled up on the things that will speak to me.
Yeah.
And it was like every time that it would have dipped me out, I was dipped into somebody else, and I was just kind of like, oh shit, I love this movie.
And also, no offense to Lucas Hedges. I think he does a great job in this movie, but Chalamet wears it better.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this review of Boy Erased.
Got it.
All this talk of boys, I was confused which film we were talking about again. Stephen Miller, if people want to find you throughout the week, where is it that they may do that?
They can go to twitter.com/sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or Twitter.com/ChristopherIRL. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, you can do so on Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at Twitter.com/SpoilerWarning or like us at Facebook.com/TheSpoilerWarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from the soundtrack to Boy Erased, so hopefully you're enjoying that. And also, one last recommend, the Radiolab people are doing a podcast series in conjunction with this film called Unerased. I recommend that you also check that out for more backstory of the true things surrounding this case, this story. Like everything's a fucking true crime thing.
Dun.
But yeah, there it is. We're going to take off, and we will see y'all in the next review.
Bye.